Hey everyone, welcome back to the What If Jesse and James Took the Gym Challenge. I gotta tell you, this What If has been a lot of fun so far. Coming up for ideas for it has been a little bit on the frustrating side, as I don't want this just to be a carbon copy Jesse and James turn good story. But I want it to focus as much as possible on the growth of them as trainers. And that's where you guys come in. Because the comments and suggestions you all have been leaving are amazing. And it shows that there are others out there who have the same interests as me. But enough with my rambling. Let's get into the video. Okay, last time we left off with Jesse and James earning the Heat Badge, and James's growing frustration with Jesse in only taking battles she could win. As a result, James opted to split up, due to the trio having different goals to accomplish at this point in time. We pick back up with James stating his case on why they should split up. And after making his argument, Meowth chimes in. Surprisingly, the feline is on board with James's idea. He stated after looking around, he thinks that Mount Chimney would be the perfect place to establish the main base in Hoenn, as it is very hard to access and would be perfect to conceal and cover Team Rocket coming and going. Not to mention that Lava Ridge Town is at the base for much needed supplies. Jesse is taken back by this. She never wanted to split up, and now her attitude is driving a wedge between the team. But she is outvoted 2-1, so ultimately she goes along with it. The next day, Jesse and James head out, while Meowth stays behind. Jesse decides to head back down Route 14 toward Mauville City, while James decides to head through Meteor Falls, back toward Rustboro, then to Petalburg City. Overall, James's route will take the longest, so Jesse decides she will head to the base they set up on Route 14 once she is done in Mauville City, until James makes contact with them and they will meet back up with Meowth in Lava Ridge Town. Jesse arrives in Mauville City and heads straight for the gym. Watson greets her and asks if she is finally ready to have the battle she passed on before. Jesse, a little overconfident now that she has Nummel, says she is, and she plans to take it 3-0. Watson says he likes her spirit, and they head into the gym to get started. Once on the battlefield, Watson sends in Magneton. This is just what Jesse was expecting, so she sends in her new secret weapon, Nummel. But there is a problem. Nummel is asleep. Jesse screams at it to wake up, but it doesn't respond. Watson just stares at Jesse as she loses her mind. Watson tells her if Nummel doesn't wake up, then he will be forced to disqualify it. Jesse freezes. If Nummel doesn't wake up, then she will be at a disadvantage, and she will lose the match. She turns to Nummel again and scolds it some more, but nothing. And Watson makes the call to disqualify it. Jesse recalls it and thinks to herself if she should even go on with the battle. Then Watson tells her, in all my years of being a gym leader, I've seen and fought many battles, in some which people had no chance of winning, but somehow they managed to take it in the end. He tells her, don't give up. She can still win this. Jesse thinks to herself, maybe. After some thought, Watson tells her to make her choice or be disqualified. Jesse chooses and sends in Loudred, and the battle gets underway. Although Jesse puts up a decent fight, Loudred ends up losing to Magneton, putting Jesse down to just one Pokemon. But she opts to keep going. She holds a Pokeball in her hand and thinks to herself, I know you'll be at a disadvantage, but you are my strongest Pokemon. So if anyone can do it, it's you. And Jesse sends in Arbok. The battle comes down to the wire. Arbok does no dig, and it does get some hits in, but it is ultimately not enough, and the two Pokemon end up knocking each other out. Jesse losing the match. Jesse recalls Arbok and turns to leave. Watson stops her. He says he would be glad to have another battle with her when she's trained up some more. Jesse says nothing and leaves. Later, it is at the Pokemon Center. Nurse Joy returns with her Pokemon, and asks her if she's alright. Jessy, feeling down since her loss at the gym, and out of pure loneliness, she confesses to Nurse Joy about her frustrations and how she doesn't know what to do, especially about Nummel. Nurse Joy tells Jessy she needs to be patient, as Nummel is still very young. Jessy thinks to herself, she's never raised a young Pokemon before. She doesn't know how to go about it. Nurse Joy tells Jessy to spend some time with it, get to know it, and her other Pokemon. Every Pokemon is different. Then she leaves. Jessy reflects on this, and she thinks what Watson said. Training. Nurse Joy said. Jessy thinks on this, and she thinks about what Watson said about training, and what Nurse Joy said, getting to know her Pokemon. That's just what she's going to do. The next day, Jessy gets to work and heads to the base on Route 14. Now, we shift over to James. He is enjoying his newfound freedom. So much so that he gets to Fall Arbor Town and he chooses to enter the Pokemon contest to help with his training. He doesn't get very far, only to the first round of battling. But this is important. He was working with his newly caught Surskit, and during the battle in the contest, it evolved into Masquerain. Even though the judges loved this, it still wasn't enough to win the match. But James is happy. He and his Pokemon both got stronger. Then, outside of Fall Arbor Town, James has an encounter with a wild Pokemon. While training with Aron, a wild Zangoose attacks out of nowhere. Aron does its best to hold it back, but it won't stop, and James doesn't know why. Aron does manage to weaken it considerably, and because it won't stop attacking, James makes the choice to catch it, bringing his team to 6. James has now made his way to Petalburg City. James has been on the road for a few weeks, training the whole time, but he is still having problems with Zangoose. It hasn't come around all the way. It has a super aggressive personality and is proving difficult for James. But he is up for the challenge. James heads to the gym the next day after arriving in Petalburg City to meet with Norman. Once there, Norman greets him and asks if he's back for more problems to destroy the gym or an actual gym battle. James replies, a battle. Sorry about the previous encounter. So James and Norman head inside. The battle starts. Norman sends in Slakoth. James, expecting this from watching Jesse's battle with him, James decides to match Norman's strategy and sends in Zangoose. The battle starts, and it is clear that Zangoose is over-aggressive towards Slakoth, and as a result, it takes the battle very quick. James is happy about this, but Norman matches the aggression of Zangoose and sends out Vigoroth. And man, the two go at it. To the point that Zangoose stops listening to James and just attacks continuously. James recalls it. Zangoose isn't disqualified, but it needs a cooldown point. James sends in Aron, and the battle with Vigoroth continues. But Vigoroth is more agitated than usual due to the battle with Zangoose, and the intensity of the battle pushes Aron to the edge. This forces its evolution into Lairon. With his newfound power, Lairon is able to match Vigoroth, resulting in a double knockout between the two. James is proud of Lairon, but now he knows what's coming as Norman sends in Slaking. James knows that this is going to be tough, but he knows he can win. James sends in Breloom. James thinks, due to his type advantage, he will be able to take down Slaking, but this false sense of security costs him, and Slaking comes after Breloom with full force, knocking it out. James knows he got overconfident. He checks himself, and he knows he only has one shot. He has to take it. James sends back in Zangoose. It immediately starts to attack Slaking, but gets checked real hard. Not enough to knock it out, but enough to straighten it out. James calls to it, telling Zangoose they will have to work together in order to win. Zangoose looks back and nods. James orders a swords dance. He knows that he needs to end it with one shot, and takes advantage of Slaking's truant ability. Then, Norman orders a focus punch. James takes advantage of Slaking's slow speed and orders Zangoose to use Crush Claw. This connects, and it seems to have on added effects on slacking. It can't move. James takes his opportunity and orders another Crush Claw, which connects with full force, knocking out slacking and earning James his 5th badge. Later that night, James establishes communication with Meowth. James asks about the base. Meowth says it's coming along great. He's almost done, but they have a major problem. James asks what it is. Meowth says he hasn't heard from Jessy in almost a month. The last time he heard from her was when she lost her first gym badge at the Mauville gym. But now, he's lost all contact with her. This worries James. He tells Meowth that he will head to Mauville City first thing in the morning. James hangs up the phone with Meowth to get some sleep. James heads out the very next morning. It takes about a week to reach Mauville City. During this time, James spent the time working with Zangoose, Lairon, and Masquerain. Zangoose has come around, and James and the rest of his Pokemon now get along with it. Once James reaches Mauville City, he heads to the Pokemon Center in search of Jessy. Once he speaks with Nurse Joy, James finds out that Jessy has only been at the Pokemon Center a handful of times in the past month, spending most of her time north of the city, but not knowing what for. James knows, and he heads to the base that they established north of the city. Once he arrives there, he is surprised. James thought there would be some members of Team Rocket out on patrol. The base they established could hold 10 people, so he figured there'd be at least one outside. But there's no one. So James heads inside. The whole place is in disarray. James is worried about Jessy. Thinking something may have happened, he heads outside. He sends out Masquerain and tells it to go look out for Jessy or any signs of her. After a while, it comes back and leads James to a clearing deep in the forest. There is Jessy. She is barking commands at Numel once again. But it just looks at her, and then it starts to play. This frustrates Jessy, and she collapses from the frustration. James rushes over to her. She is surprised to see him. Jessy asks James what he's doing here. Did he beat Norman? James flashes the balance badge. Jessy smiles, but gets quiet. James asks her what's wrong. She unloaded all of her frustrations on James. James comments losing a gym battle is not the end of the world. You can always re-challenge. That's the problem, Jessy screams. I already re-challenged the gym and lost. James gets quiet. Jessy continues, I tried 2 times, and I couldn't beat Watson. Now I don't know what to do. I can't even get Numel to listen to me. James tells Jessy, let's have a battle. Maybe it'll help. Jessy stares at James and eventually agrees. And they get started. Jessy chooses Numel. James sends out Zangoose. Jessy is impressed. James has caught a new Pokemon. She's glad to see he's keeping up with his training. Jessy starts barking out commands, but Numel won't move. It just lays there. James tells Zangoose to use Crush Claw, which connects. This does get Numel's attention, and it suddenly wants to battle. Jessy, out of frustration, says, finally, then orders an Ember, but Zangoose dodges and connects with another Crush Claw, knocking it out. Jessy lets out another scream of frustration. This always happens. James recalls Zangoose, and then they head inside the base. James is trying to talk Jessy down as he establishes communication with Meowth to update on the situation. Once Meowth answers, he tells Jessy and James that they need to return to Mount Chimney Base at once. No excuses. Jessy says, but I haven't beaten Watson yet. Meowth says, no excuses. Get here now, and hangs up the phone. Jessy is now even more frustrated. Why is Meowth insisting that they return? James tries to calm Jessy down, insisting that they will return once they hear out Meowth and what it has to say. Jessy doesn't like this, but she agrees, and they return to Mount Chimney. They do seize the opportunity of some training along the way there. And as a result, they discover one major thing. Seviper and Zangoose do not get along. Even more than Arbok and Seviper. Even Arbok seems to have a problem with Zangoose. But, anyway, They arrive back at Mount Chimney. Once they enter, Meowth asks them what took so long, where have they been? James says it took a minute, but they did get here. What is so important that they had to return for? Meowth says, them. It's Butch and Cassidy. Jessy asks, what are they doing there? Cassidy tells her, is that any way to talk to your boss? Jessy gets quiet. Butch tells them they are here to take over this base. It was Meowth's task to get a real base ready for them, as the one in Duford Island was not what you would call a command post for Team Rocket. It was pathetic. James snaps at Butch. That was no reason to call them back so urgently. They still have things to do. Cassidy tells the two of them, that is not the reason that you were called back. Jessy says, then what is it? Cassidy says, that's simple. You two have gained quite the teams of Pokemon between the two of you. So it's simple. It's time you make your payment. James says, payment? Questioning what they mean. Butch responds, you know, the fee for being a member of Team Rocket. Giving up your Pokemon to further Team Rocket's power. And that's all we have for part 3. What do you guys think? How do you like the direction James' Pokemon team is going? What about the rut that Jessy is in? And of course, the fee for being a member of Team Rocket. Let me know in the comments below. I'll see you in the next video. Ronan Charizard, signing out. Hey everyone. I just wanted to say thank you for your support. If you like the content that I'm providing, please don't forget to subscribe. And also, don't forget to leave a like, as it really helps out with the YouTube algorithm and helps my content get to a bigger audience to help the channel grow. I will see you in the next video.